when you're first going through the first exam of pharmacology, physiology, seeing how difficult it is, the stress you have when you're prepping for those exams. And that time you start questioning yourself, what if I got into medical school? What if I got into PA school? What would this story be like?
Welcome to the Awakened Anesthetist podcast. I'm your host, Mary Roberts. I'm a certified anesthesiologist assistant living and working outside of Kansas City, Missouri. I created this podcast to give CAAs across the nation a place to come together and awaken to our profession's unique ability to create a life by design rather than default. That process can start by simply listening and engaging with this podcast. By doing so, you're already changing what's possible for CAAs, for you, for me, for all of us. I'm so thankful you're here. Let's jump into this episode and see what we can do together. Hello, this is your host, Mary Jean. Welcome to the Awakened Anesthetist podcast. It is finally May here in Kansas City, which means the weather is getting warmer. My lilacs happen to bloom this week, and I am excited to bring you this third and final installment in the Student Process series, as promised. If you've not known or heard about the Student Process series that we've been undertaking here at the Awakened Anesthetist, go back and listen to episode 25 featuring Charlie Chase, and then episode 30, which just came out, is a live interview with a bunch of AA students who I met at the American Academy of Anesthesiologist Assistants, our national conference this year in Dallas, Texas. Today's episode is with Bill Ding. I spoke with Bill back in late fall, probably it was, of 2022. I actually was introduced to Bill by one of my former Process episode guests. That guest had met Bill as Bill was trying to find hospitals that would sponsor his work visa. That's because Bill is an international student from Shanghai, China. And because of that, this episode will be wildly expansive to any prospective international AA students, any current international AA students, or any current international pre-medical students who are looking for alternative pathways in the world of medicine. Or any CAAs out there who don't know what it's like to be an international AA student, and possibly whether you have a role in making it more open for more international students to apply to AA programs that you happen to be involved with, or hospitals that you work at that would possibly take a student on a visa. And with that, welcome Bill to the Awakened Anesthetist.
Thank you so much, Mary, for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Bill, it's so good to have you. I'm so glad that our paths crossed. Can you kick us off by just giving us a download of your cultural background and your upbringing, just so we can get to know Bill, the person, better, not Bill, the CAA student?
Absolutely. So, like you said, Mary, I grew up in Shanghai, China. And one benefit of growing up in a relatively bigger size city in China is that you grew up with a lot of cultural diversities and intersections. And one big intersection that I was always interested in was the combination of Chinese medicine and Western medicine when I grew up. Growing up in a family in a relatively older district in Shanghai, I always see my grandparents using Chinese medicine to help with their family wellness in ways of like drinking tea and boiling some medicine to lower what they said, the body fat content and, lower the blood pressure. But in the meantime, when we have illness, we go to hospital and we're introduced to Western medicine, like the modern technologies. So they kind of piqued my interest into seeing what's the difference and how can we combine Chinese and Western medicine together to provide some remedies to some family wellness. So that's something that I was really interested in, just to see the intersection. So in my high school, I tried to go into some STEM project where we use some technology to study some Chinese medicine. That gave me a brief introduction. And I realized maybe coming to the United States to see, to study a major where I can use technology to study either healthcare or just herbal remedies will be really cool to me. So here I am, coming to United States to get a major in some medical related technology major, and then later on discovered the CAA profession.
Can you walk us back a little bit to tell the listeners how you got a student visa? And just to clarify, because we have spoke about this before, you didn't know about the CAA program when you first came to the United States. So could you kind of take us back into getting the student visa to come to the United States, and then how you found Case Western Reserve, and then how you found the CAA program?
Absolutely. So then at that time I was in my high school. I was in a public high school, and everybody is aiming full gear towards the college entrance exam towards all the college in China. There is some sort of competition. It's sometimes it's pretty intense. And I was in my second last year of my high school. We're looking at our grades with regard to ranking in the high school, and my parents and I were talking about opportunity to come to United States just to have a different route of development and a career exploration compared to just going straight towards competition in my high school. We're given both opportunities, and we kind of analyzed our personal finance strength. We decided to come to United States because we just see it as a different opportunity. And by then, different colleges in the United States, they have the opportunity to enroll international students because they are able to offer what is called an F1 visa, the student visa. So we just apply like a normal applicant from United States or from international countries. We send in our common app, look for a college that will fit us well. And later in the process, I come across with Case Western Reserve University, where I saw there are a lot of medical education opportunities. And there's a cancer center where there's a program in particular related to using Chinese medicine herbal remedies, which kind of piqued my interest. I try to mention that in my application, but it might be too niche or too detailed. So we decided to focus our goal to enrolling to the college first. So that's how we came to Case Western Reserve University. And the school was okay and willing to offer me a student visa, and they have a really great international student services office where they will work on all the documentations for international students that come to the United States. And that basically started my journey to come to the United States as an international student.
Tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from thinking you were going to integrate the Chinese medicine, herbal medicine into, do we call it Western medicine, integrate those two things, to realizing that that wasn't your path, and then transitioning over to CAA school?
Absolutely. So in my high school, I thought about using medical technology to study how some particular Chinese herbs was able to change the bacterial situation in the stomach to help digest different type of diets. And I realized that's something really interesting. And so when I came to the United States and tried to find research opportunity, I was looking for something in the same area. Once again, Western technology to study herbal remedies. And I encountered this lab where principal investigator was actually an oncologist, tried to use Western technology to study a type of mistletoe in a way of treating liver cancer, which is pretty cool to me. It's a type of mistletoe. Yeah, the Christmas tree mistletoe. It's not exactly the same, but it's more of a European deviation of the mistletoe species. And they were collaborating with different cancer institutes just to study how some kind of protein from this mistletoe can treat particular aspects of genomes in the liver cancer. So it's really interesting to me. So I decided to go in and do research. It was really interesting initially, but later on, I had the opportunity to shadow him, an oncologist, and get some referral from him to some anesthesiologist, where I step into the operating room to study to shadow surgeries and just anesthesia in general. As that was the time I started finding the difference. First of all, in hospital, especially in the operating room environment, a lot of the equipments that are being used have a lot of medical technology components inside of it. And that's aligning with my education, my major, which is biomedical engineering. And I found that pretty fascinating just to see how we transduce signals to something that we can read. And what's more interesting to that is we can see the aspect of treating patient and seeing the results of patient recovering in real time. And that's pretty fulfilling to me. I still like the research and enjoyed it, but later on, I realized research is the process is very long, and you sometimes don't see the return for a long time. And I realized that might not be the best for me because sometimes I get a little impatient in wanting to see some results, some return a little sooner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started switching my career from maybe research to actually maybe a little more in the anesthesia environment. And I was lucky enough because Case Western Reserve University has a CAA program, Master of Science in Anesthesia, and that is actually pretty well developed already. That time was already more than 50 years. So I went to an open house, got my feet wet into the career of CAA, and then I just switched my gear towards this aspect of healthcare.
Very serendipitous. There's so much through line to other CAA stories where a lot of people don't know about. Like, they didn't go to undergraduate thinking I'm going to be a CAA. And it's just so interesting to always hear how people stumble upon the profession. And there's so many commonalities, like that desire to see the end result more quickly and to have that like immediate gratification. Can you tell us about any differences or what it felt like to apply to the CAA program as an international student? If there were pitfalls, if there were open doors that were accessible, just in case anyone out there is an international student that's thinking about going to a CAA school?
Yeah, sounds good. So what I know is not all CAA programs allow international students to apply. Usually the requirement is either you are a US citizen or you are a green card holder, meaning the permanent residency holder.
Why would that be? Can you help me understand why we would not allow international students in some programs?
Well, this might go back to the aspect of medical school too.
Okay.
Some medical schools don't want international students to be, or there can be some limitations because in some way the school doesn't want to educate the students who eventually will not give back to their own community. There's a possibility of students going back to the home country to serve, and it might be a loss in some way of talent in medical education. So this is one concern. The other concern is the outcome. Sometimes when a student is on an international visa status, when they graduate, they might encounter a situation when there are only a few hospitals that are willing to offer them a job with a working visa sponsorship. So kind of evaluating that risk and benefit, some schools have the limitation of not wanting to enroll international applicants, but there's still opportunity out there for us.
Mm-hmm. So, that statistic that you can see on some CAA schools' websites where 100% of our graduates receive jobs, right away, that could be a concern why they would not take on an international student, because if you do not find a hospital that will sponsor your work visa, then you cannot work in the United States as a CAA, even though you've graduated.
Correct.
The risk of losing a CAA back to their home country is not valid for us. So I could see how, maybe schools, because oftentimes they just follow the medical school algorithm for their CAA school in terms of rules and regulations, that would be not applicable. So, okay, well, room for the CAA profession to grow then. I'm dying to hear about your process of finding that work visa yourself as you are approaching graduation here. We're recording in the winter of 2022. And so Bill has about 5-ish more months. So Bill, let's get into what I last knew about your journey, which was that you were doing your away rotations in the Case Cleveland program, which is where also I graduated from. The second year is really the clinical year, and you're doing 1-month rotations. They may be in Ohio, they could be in other states. And you were explaining to me when we did our intro interview that you were still looking for hospitals to sponsor your work visa. So can you take us back and just explain the process of needing a work visa and when your student visa expires or transitions? Explain to the listeners that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all started before I started my CAA school. I was at the open house. I was talking to the mission committee saying I'm on student visa. When I apply for this profession, apply for this program, and I graduate, will I be able to obtain a working visa or need a sponsorship from the hospital? One thing I did learn was hospitals, majority of the hospitals are nonprofit organization. When it comes to sponsoring working visa, usually there's a lottery for business companies to select an applicant for a working visa. But from nonprofits, sometimes this lottery can be skipped. So universities and hospitals are usually nonprofit organizations who can make working visa happen without the lottery and the risk. And the admission committee at my school said they have experience with people graduating from the program with a student visa and obtain a working visa. So that kind of reassured me in looking into this profession and applying for this profession. And once I started the school, I talked to my mentors, I talked to my program teachers and asked them about opportunities of different hospitals offering working visa. And I realized the best way, other than the navigation, is to go to the Quad A, the American Academy of Anesthesiology Assistants Conference, usually happening in April, just to talk directly to the recruiters and ask them, hey, have you had experience in sponsoring visa in the past? And this is my situation. So this past April, we were in Florida, in Destin, and we were at a conference at a recruitment fair. I talked to a few recruiters, and it's really serendipitous that to see some places in Atlanta, some hospitals in DC, and some hospitals in Indiana, they're able to offer sponsorship because they have experience before. Some hospitals are on a case-by-case status. They don't always offer sponsorship for everybody as long as they apply. They want to evaluate their performance and the skills by having a rotation at their hospital. So it's really serendipitous initially because, just trying to meet brand new hospitals, but then this connection stayed from April down to September. I went to Atlanta in September for a rotation. I went to DC in November for a rotation. And, it's me learning about a city. It's also the opportunity for them to learn about me. And I was able to connect with their recruitment team again a few months later. And they said, we love to have you here if you want to apply. And we had experience with sponsorship in the past. So if you apply later on, when you make your decision, we'd be able to help you with the visa. So it's really, just a random connection initially, but then it grew and it built up eventually to a clinical rotation for 1 month and there's a stronger connection. So I feel really grateful for this opportunity and the entire process.
Wow, Bill. I want to break down that interaction you had at the Quad A, because I think that is huge. And I think it can be also a little hard maybe to realize that you will have to do a little bit extra work. And not that, traditional CAA students don't have to make connections. And, if they want to work somewhere, maybe in a new state, they need to make those connections. But going in as an international student that there will be some limitations and that there will be some barriers they have to navigate around. So I'd love to empower the listener to just break down exactly who you spoke to, what that looked like, maybe what you said. Were you talking to anesthesiologists? Were you talking to HR people at the Quad A? And just, kind of maybe empower the listener to feel more comfortable.
Absolutely. So during Quad A, I was at a recruitment booth, in particular hospitals, for example, in Indianapolis, Indiana University Health, and they have been sponsors for international applicants in the past. So the
international CAA students?
That's right. CAA international students in the past. So when I went to the booth, I introduced myself, handing my resume, and just show my strong interest to looking for an opportunity into these hospitals. Explain my situation. Say, hey, I'm born in Shanghai. I'm not a U.S. citizen, but I'm really interested in the opportunity to become a CAA. Have your hospital had experience sponsoring non-citizens to work in the United States before? Well, many hospitals will actually say they've had experience to take residents, medical student graduates who become residents or fellows who are on a training visa to come to the United States for the training. Not all of them had experience with working visa directly, but they're willing to look into it. And sometimes I got lucky, for example, in Indianapolis, the IU Health, in Atlanta, if I'm allowed to say the hospital name, Northside Hospital in Atlanta,
yes.
And in DC, it's the MassStar Washington Hospital Center or the MassStar system. They've had experience with offering sponsorship for advanced practitioners, including CAAs for a working visa. So they are willing to look into it, and in return, they will want to have some, rotation or stronger connection, so that they can know about you better. So that's how we built a connection in April. I sent a thank you note to them, and we kind of kept in touch. And I requested a way rotation from my program. They approved it, and I was lucky enough because the case Cleveland program has a lot of connections to all the hospitals around the states we're allowed to work in. So this connection just grew on to the administration level as well. So we just kind of keep in touch.
So you set yourself up for an away rotation in Atlanta at a hospital that you had made connections with initially at the Quad A, knowing that they had previous experience sponsoring work visas, and then the same thing for that DC area hospital. And tell us what the experience was when you actually went on those rotations. How might it have differed for a traditional CAA student? And then how did you leave it with those two hospitals? And I guess if you've committed or think, you don't have to say everything right now, obviously, if you're still in that process. But
yeah, no, absolutely. I personally think that the entire process of going to a different city, it's brand new for me. But I personally don't think this process is much different from American student, because as long as the first process of knowing, your status, knowing you're on an F1 visa, which can be sponsored by your own school, then this burden of international student status will be lifted, and for the rest of the process, just same onboarding. But it is really interesting for me because I've never really been to Atlanta myself, and trying to apply for a car rental as a Chinese passport holder and under the age of 25 requires some extra fee into trying to find a safe option and making the company feel comfortable renting you a car. This process is long, but I really enjoyed it eventually. And in the hospital, many CAA preceptors are really fascinated by the fact that I'm from a different country, so they always wanted to ask what it was like to be in a city in China compared to Atlanta, a city in the United States, the level of how crowded it can be, how busy it can be. So I found a lot of similarity between downtown Atlanta and Shanghai. In particular, the hospitals, it's always busy. You have people waiting in the area right in front of elevators just to get checked in for a surgery.
Really?
And I found it really similar to when I was in Shanghai.
So did you find you were most comfortable in Atlanta and sort of most interested in pursuing that for work?
I'm not sure yet. It's dependent on my significant other too, because my girlfriend is actually a U.S. citizen and she's applying to medical school. So it's kind of a difficult process to coordinate where she's going to school and where I'm going to work. So right now, just exploring all the opportunities, and I really appreciate the fact that many hospitals are willing to give me some extension of time period until she hear back from the medical schools, and that be able to make my final decision. I really enjoy my rotation in DC and Atlanta because they are, on a city scale level similar to my hometown. I also made some really great connections, but eventually I think it's dependent on where we will relocate based on the school results as well.
Yeah, I hope you don't run into a problem where your significant other gets into medical school in a state you can't practice, because unfortunately that is a limitation of the CAA profession, that we are not licensed in every state. And there are those stories where, you are separated or something has to happen. So I hope that works out for you, Bill. And when I post this episode in 5 months, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes where you committed and how that all worked out, so our listeners can have some clarity at the end of your journey. I'm interested to know what the international CAA student community is like, or did you feel like you were the only one to do this process? It sounds like there were international CAA students, obviously, before you that have been managing the visa process, but what is it like to be a CAA student within the international community?
I actually felt like it's small, but there's a community of international applicants pursuing the profession of CAA. What I know is 2 years above me at the Case Cleveland program, there were actually three international students, from China and from Vietnam. And the year following me at Case Cleveland, there are two international students, one from Ecuador and one from India. And so it feels like we have a strong connection because almost every year we have about 2 to 3 international students in the Case Cleveland program. So we're just looking out for each other. I start my program asking, hey, my friend 2 years above me, you went to this hospital. What was the process like? Was the working visa application fast? What question should I ask when I reach out to recruiters? In the same way, now that I'm a second year and I have obtained some information from hospital, my teacher administrator at my program and I were trying to make a list of hospitals that have had experience or are willing to sponsor visas, and we give this list to the next year, to the year below me. So the two students from India and Ecuador, they can look into that so they can save a lot of work for them too.
Yes. I am hoping this episode also helps those international students who are out there or future international students who will be CAA students, because, as you said, it is a small community, it sounds like. And to not have to reinvent the wheel makes the future CAA students even stronger applicants, because their energy is not necessarily going into making those exact same pushes and connections that, you've had to, and you've been so generous to pass down that information, Bill. I just think you're such a valuable asset to our community, just to be open enough to sharing your story and to also passing along information. Can you clarify the process of having a student visa and then a working visa and then path to citizenship? You had mentioned a little bit when we spoke earlier about how long you had to work on a working visa and just, how that varies from country to country.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an international student, you are on an F1 visa for student status. And depending if you're on a trainee, you will be on a J1 visa, but it's not usually for students going through schools. They're actually on training. So for majority of students who are on F1 visa, once they graduate from college or their own master's or PhD program, they have the opportunity to apply for a training called optional practical training, or OPT. And this training allowed them to kind of bridge from the F1 visa, which ends by the time they graduate from the
From
school,
undergrad,
to or PhD or master's, any educational program. So it does this bridging from the graduation period where your student visa is going to end to the part when your working visa is going to start. Now, we cannot wait for forever between your student visa ending to the point of your working visa starting. This OPT, depending on your major, usually lasts for 1 to 3 years. If you are in a STEM major, engineering or math, you are allowed to have an OPT up to 3 years. Just be on this training status to work at either a research institute or a company. If you're a non-STEM major, you only have 1 year. I'm not too sure if anesthesia count as STEM or not, but we will have this OPT bridging us from F1 to H1B, which is the working visa we were working on.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, meaning you have a year to find a job, or you have a year, what does that mean if you have a year?
It's from a year from your working student visa ends to your working visa start to be in effect. So I personally think when you apply for OPT, you will need to have a job offered from a company or hospital.
Because the process of getting a working visa isn't like, oh, here, Bill, here's your working visa. You wanted one. It's like an application process that might take up to a year to do all of the logistics and back and forth.
Right.
Okay, that's why you need the OPT. Got it. Okay. Lead us forward.
Yeah, and some companies, like I mentioned before, they might do a lottery. So if you don't get a lottery for this year, you might need to go through a different process. And if you're in an unfortunate situation where for many years you got the lotteries to get a working visa and you always miss the lottery and your OPT is almost expiring, some people decide to go back to school to have another education opportunities that can be in the United States. And some people, sadly, they might need to go back to their own country, which might not be their original plan. But this is what happens when you miss a lottery. And if you're a nonprofit, for example, being a professor at a university, that lottery can be skipped. So it's a little more secure for you to find a job and working in the United States. Now, we have a particular application process for permanent residency or green card. It depends on how many years we work in the United States. It depends on our nationality. Usually for people from China, India, since we have a lot of people applying for permanent residency, there's a waiting time. People who are on a master level usually have a wait time. Regarding China, people usually have a wait time about 2 to 3 years to just get the application processed. And in order for you to be able to apply for the green card, you need to be working or be a resident in the United States for up to 5 years. So, this entire process can take a very long time. When I was in DC, we have, colleagues who are attending anesthesiologists, finishing the training in a different country, and it came to United States. And the entire green card application process took very long, 7 or 8 years. And after getting a green card, another couple of years to eventually apply to be a citizen and take the citizenship test as well.
So when you obtain your working visa and as a CAA, you're saying, and it sounds like for all working visas, it's a little bit more flexible, maybe possibly a little easier to obtain if you go through a nonprofit institution. So you've been specifically looking at nonprofit hospitals. Even after you obtain your working visa, you're looking at, depending on what your country of origin is, you're looking at up to 8 years before you can even advance into green card. And then from green card, you would advance to.
Right. And it really varies from country to country as well.
Wow. Yeah. Why might an international student who is currently pre-med or as you were biomedical engineering, why might they pick CAA school route versus medical school route, or why did you pick that, knowing the length of time you've got in front of you?
Right. Well, I think the length of time applying for a visa and eventually the green card is going to be the same regardless of what what profession you choose. And knowing that you're able to shorten your education period so you can get your working visa and green card application early in your life, it's going to be beneficial. And for me in particular, since I'm an international student, I was able to apply for a loan in the United States through a federal or government process. So all my tuition is supported by my family. And recently, as COVID hit, there's always financial burden related to the pandemic. So I didn't want my parents to work extra hard, in their 50s, trying to accumulate enough, financial power to support me through medical school 4 years. So initially we wanted to apply for both medical school and the AA program at the same time. But later on, I chose the AA program because of tuition, the length of education, and the return of investment through the 2-year master's program.
The same reason why so many pre-med students or people who are thinking they're going to become a physician end up choosing the CAA program. I mean, I think that's one of our biggest strengths is that you can get out so much sooner with so much less debt, making a great salary. You can start repaying those loans. So I appreciate you sharing those details. Bill, anything else as we kind of come here to a close about your decision to become a CAA, pros or cons for you, anything that's developed that feels particular to your story that you would want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I understand that many of my friends, coming to CAA school were also on a path of like being indecisive or on the fence between whether they want to go to medical school or they want to go to PA school or they want to go AA school. And for me, I eventually chose the Master of Science in Anesthesia. There was definitely some, self-questioning initially starting, when you're first going through the first exam of pharmacology, physiology, seeing how difficult it is, the stress you have when you're prepping for those exams. And that time you start questioning yourself, what if I got into medical school? What if I got into PA school? What would the story be like? And why you feel more confident because that's your original goal. But eventually, as I went through, all the education, and now second year seeing that I'm already in clinicals, practicing some skills that some medical students might not have started learning yet. It's really fulfilling, and it's gaining the confidence of your own profession and being able to make that connection with many hospitals across the nation is something that's really fulfilling, and it's something that just kind of reassure that you made the right decision. And I want to tell many pre-med students who might be international and who are looking into a different pre-health profession that you seriously consider the Master of Science in Anesthesia program or the profession of Certified Anesthesiologist Assistant. Just look at the return of investment, the year of education, and the early on exposure to the clinical environment. I think in many ways these will give you the same feeling of fulfillment, like being a medical doctor or in an area you can practice healthcare. So I think this is something that I want to advocate for. I was lucky enough to be selected as the student chief for my program, and I was hoping through this connection as a leader, I will make more network with different CAA programs and just engage more international applicants to think about our profession and look into this career.
Yes, Bill, I'm so grateful to have you because I think what you're doing right now is exactly part of that path, is just sharing your story. And, you had the luxury, I guess, of knowing some international CAA students ahead of you, and the people below you have the luxury of knowing yourself. And now a much wider community is going to have the luxury of knowing you and hearing your story. So I'm really grateful to you, and I appreciate your time. Last question is there anything you would like to tell your younger self, your younger Bill, that if he would have known, it would have made your journey a lot easier?
One thing I definitely want to tell the younger myself is when you're exploring opportunities, don't get too much pressure from your peers or your family in the aspect of you have to go to medical school, you have to pursue a higher degree, because in the United States, I personally think you have way more opportunities to excel in a particular area you're interested in. For a long time, I was really aiming towards going to medical school, trying to check out the list of what a pre-med student needs to finish. But then you realize maybe there's this aspect of, anesthesiology that will give you similar fulfillment. And one most important thing for me growing up in an Asian family is to, I wish I could have been more open into telling my parents and explaining throughout this entire process to my parents who are not, familiar with the area of CAA, and make them support me throughout the entire process. I told my decision to my parents kind of late in the process, so there was some misunderstanding and miscommunication in why I'm applying for both profession, eventually choosing the profession I'm interested in the most. So being able to have that communication early on and have people who love you to support you throughout the entire process is, I think it's something I wish I could have done. And just being very open about this process of advocating as well.
Oh, yes, I love that. So much of this podcast is about using the CAA profession to create a life by design rather than default, meaning rather than the life you thought you were supposed to have or that everyone else wanted for you. And the CAA profession is so unique in empowering, I think, CAA professionals to live that life. And it sounds like you've stumbled upon that exact same feeling yourself through your own journey. So I just, again, I'm so grateful to have you. Can I put your email in the show notes if anyone wants to contact you after listening?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome, Bill. This was a great conversation. I've learned so much, and I hope that you are, one of many future international CAA students who find the program and use it to create their life by design. And I really hope that this episode goes far and wide, Bill, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Bill.
Have a good one.
I hope you all enjoyed this third and final installment in the Student Process series. These Student Process episodes were meant to expand current or prospective AA students and inspire them along their journey to become a practicing CAA. If you are a current international AA student or prospective international AA student, I would love to hear from you and let me know how this episode landed for you. My email is awakenedanesthesis@gmail.com, or you can message me on Discord or Instagram. Both those links are in the show notes. Because this episode was recorded way back in November of 2022, Bill has included a little update. He was attending Case Cleveland, as you all heard, and he was set to graduate May of 2023. So listen all the way to the very, very end of this podcast episode to hear a final update on where Bill landed for his career. I'm loving making this podcast for you guys. If you're liking what I'm doing here, or you've really enjoyed a particular episode, I invite you to rate and review this podcast on whatever podcast app you're listening. Apple and Spotify probably are the two biggest and make it the easiest to rate and review shows. They really help other people in the CAA community find the podcast and to hear a little bit about what you like about the podcast and why they should listen too. You may have heard this podcast is taking a summer break, meaning I am taking a summer break. So there will be no new episodes released in July or August. I do have a couple things planned, and I will be doing some interviews over the summer just to get myself ahead of schedule for the fall releases. This podcast will come back in September, but there are still 3 new episodes to enjoy before that time. So I hope you guys are all having a really nice beginning of spring as we transition here into maybe some more rest or relaxation of summer. I don't know how that lands for you. All 3 of my kids will be home, so it's not super rest and relaxing, but I am trying to be a little more intentional about taking some things off my plate so I can focus on my family over the summer. I will be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Remember, listen all the way to the end to hear that update from Bill. All right, talk soon.
Hi, Mary. This is Bill. Thank you so much again for inviting me on your podcast. I want to update with you that recently I signed an offer from the Riley Hospital for Children at Indiana University Health in Indianapolis. And the hospital is willing and is able to start my visa application for H-1B, and we will be using the OPT as a bridging process from the student visa to the work visa. I am very grateful for their availability to start a visa application this fast, and I'm excited to start my job as a full-time pediatric anesthetist for the next many years, and it's very exciting, and thank you so much again for letting me share my situation, my words as an international student in the AA profession.